So welcome back to Stu Structures. I am Mark Stewart and we're here to continue our build on the gantry crane with this video 3 of the series, so stay tuned. Okay, so we are back to continue the build on the gantry crane. We have several things to work on in this video. We need to get the overhead motor unit together and built that will raise and lower the crane bucket itself. We've got to get the controller shed mounted onto the tower and get the walkways and everything finished with that. We also have to get the linkages that control the movement of the whole gantry crane up and down the rail system itself too. I'm still trying to figure some of that one out, but I'm sure in this video we'll come to some conclusions and hopefully finish the gantry crane out with this video. So let's just jump into this. Well, the first thing I want to start with is the drive system that drives the whole thing up and down the tracks that supports all of this. And only one wheel on each side is driven. There's a motor box in the middle of the beams, and then there's drive rods that come out, and you can see out here on the end of this that there are gearboxes and then downward rods that go down to the drive system. Now, this is the way we left the whole assembly at the end of the last video, and I've got a clear slate to start with here. So I'm going to start with the motor box in the middle of this side here, and I go through in my boxes and just find all the dowels and various pieces of plastic that I think I can use to make this stuff with. I need some flat plate, I need dowels, I've got a couple of sprue parts here for gearbox parts. So I'm just going to start by cutting some flat plate and gluing a bunch of them together to make the motor unit, and I ended up cutting 4 of these. When I glued these 3 together, they just weren't quite thick enough, so I glued the 4 of them together and just came up with a basic motor box, and then took files and sandpaper and just smoothed down all the edges where all the sheets met. Now I took the one dowel that has the center cut out of it and made a bunch of these little kind of just spacers basically, but where the drive shafts came out of that motor box, I went ahead and mounted 2 of those to either end where the drive shaft would come out of. Added a little bit of angle iron to the bottom of it, scraped the paint off of the beam in the middle where I wanted this to be, and then glued the whole thing to the beam. Now a bunch of those spacers, what I'm doing is gluing those to flat stock, and you can see I just kind of round out one end and glue them down in that and then cut them off to length. I need those across this main beam here to support the drive rod as it comes out to either end of the whole assembly. So I go ahead and glue 2 of those on either side and then put my rod through all that and glue it all in place. So at this point the whole drive assembly is good out to the ends of the legs. Now I need gearboxes out there on the end to change the horizontal drive to a vertical drive. So I'm going to use this sprue material and make these gearboxes up here. And basically I'm just cutting a couple different pieces of the sprue and gluing them together to form a T. I'm putting one end, a spacer out there on an end with a plug in it to create kind of a bearing, and then open spacers on the other 2 sides of the angle to create a place for the gear assembly to go into. And this is just a little big, but I think once I get some black paint on it and get some brackets mounting it to the unit itself, I think it'll look okay. We're going to add some plates to the bottom because the gearbox that drives the wheels down here would have been mounted down here on this steel plate. So I'm adding the steel plate to the bottom of the leg assemblies. And then, I'd use that other gearbox that I made for the bottom for where the rod comes down to that'll change the vertical back to horizontal drive to go into where the axles are. And then in between the top and bottom assemblies, I'm going to put this drive rod in. And I also add a support bracket which welds to the steel to support all that. And now all that's in place, I can go ahead and put some brackets to mount that top differential box to as well. So I'll make up these little 2 angle brackets with angle iron on them and glue those to the gearboxes at the top to secure them to the structure as well, and that's the drive assembly in place. Now at the end of the last video, we left our control little booth in this state right here, and we need to continue on with it so we can get it on the structure. Now it's mounted underneath those big I-beams with an assembly similar to this right here. Now I'm going to come back and add a little bit more bracing to this, but basically this is what went up to the I-beams. And then I'm going to come back and go ahead and put some paint on some of this and go ahead and start, getting some mistakes and stuff covered up with paint. And then on the back of that platform, we're going to go ahead and start adding the handrail. So I cut the suspension or the stanchions and glue them into place, and then start gluing the top rail into place. And then once the top rail is in place, I come through and put a second handrail down below that, and that'll finish the handrails on the box itself. And then, that's one less thing to be working on then. And that's basically the whole structure for the control booth itself. Now up above that, in the center of that, I got some walkways that extend out past the walkway where the ladder will come down into. So I add those little extensions of walkway onto what I already had up there. And I come back through and cut all my stanchions for the handrails along that upper walkway across the big beams. And then I just start coming back and gluing all those into place. And it does step out around that platform, but then the rest of it adheres straight to the face of the walkway on the big beam itself. And once all those are in place, I just, the same as the other handrail, I come back and put the top rail on all of the stanchions all the way across, including the places that step out, and then put the middle rail in as well, and that's all the handrails across the main walkway on top of the structure at this point. So now we're ready to go ahead and mount the control booth under the I-beam. And you can see here I did add some angles under the uprights that come up from that main structure to the I-beam. Now there's a ladder that comes down from that top walkway down to the control booth, and I'm going to use this styrene here and just make one. I have a couple of ladders, but they're really heavy and I don't like them, and I don't have anything pre-made, so I use my chopper and cut the little small pieces in width. I mark the side pieces at 1 foot on center, and use this piece of glass and just come back and lay it out and start gluing them on in between those rungs. And I just do a few of them at first and then add a few more and then come back and put the ones in between them. And it's not as nice as a factory ladder, but once I put black paint on it and put it in the assembly, you're not going to notice any discrepancies with it. So I'm going to roll with this as it is. Now when it comes up from the back of that booth, it actually has to lean a little to come into that upper walkway. So I go ahead and bend this structure and just put a little glue on the area where I weakened it to make it a little stiffer. And then I mount that between the lower walkway and the upper walkway. And glue all that into place. And then we have a ladder, and somebody can get all the way across the structure and down into the control booth. And then I just go ahead and I hand paint around the control booth itself, and then you just cover it up and kind of rattle can. And I'm still going to have to add more paint to this later on, but I just wanted to get some basic color and on it. So that's where it stands at this point, and it's starting to look pretty good. Well, okay, so there you have another episode of the Gantry crane. I didn't quite get this finished in this video. I'm running out of time for this week, so I just wanted to go ahead and get this video up there. We still have that motored overhead unit that moves back and forth across those long beams that handles the bucket underneath, and the bucket itself, and the cables that go between them, and the wheels underneath the main drive system for the whole unit that takes it up and down the tracks. So, you know, one more episode will do it, but, you know, the bucket, I'm kind of making it up as I go along, and, you know, I want to make it look so that, you know, the linkages and stuff would actually work if it were a real bucket. And the overhead units, I don't have a lot of good pictures, but I've got enough information. I think I can make them up and make them look halfway decent. And the drive system is coming along. The gearboxes are a little big for the main drive system, but you know, they're okay. Once I got some black paint on them and toned them down a little bit, they look alright. They're just a little big, but I'm going to live with them the way they are. And everything else is coming together really well. You know, the control box, I've got some other linkages and stuff to add into it for the controls, but basically that's the main structure of it done. We got some other little additives to put on it, you know, in the next episode, which will bring this one to a close. It took a little longer to build this than what I thought. I knew it was going to be a little complicated, and I knew there was just tons of tiny stuff that I had to make up and you know, build as I go along with it. Steel is not that hard to replicate and do steel structures and stuff, but it does take a little bit of time. It's not as easy as just cutting a piece of wood and using wood glue and gluing it to another piece of wood. So in any case, thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me. Come back next week and watch the final episode of this gantry build. Share this with people out there in the railroad community. A lot of model railroaders like to know how to build structures and things for their model railroad, and you know, some of this information is usable and would help them do that. Subscribe to my channel and hit the bell next to it down below, and you'll be notified when I have new videos come out. Hit the thumbs up down below, and you know, hit the like, and make sure that well, I hope you like my videos, or you wouldn't be here watching with me, I guess. But in any case, jump out there and get some materials and scratch build some structures, and happy model railroading.